offering it to me. So when I was thinking about Pirkei Avot and the word Avot, so normally we translate it as ethics of the fathers, but the word Avot we also have in Shabbat. We have the Av Malacha, Avot Malacha, which means the main pillars, the essential malachot. So it can be naturally fathers, but it can also be a main pillar. Rav Tanzer, when I think of you as the Av, as not only the patriarch of the family and the patriarch of Yeshiva College, but also as the pillar, like the Av Malacha, like we have on Shabbat. And I think that you teaching us Pirkei Avot, so you're not only teaching us the ethics of the fathers, but you're also teaching us how to be pillars in our community and how to be pillars for Am Yisrael and how to be good and upright people. And I think that's also the meaning of the word Avot here in Pirkei Avot, that it connects us to the Av Malacha of Shabbat. And I understand that we're going to be learning the Mishnah of Antignos Ishtocho. Is that correct? Is that the one you're going to be relating to today?
Which one?
The Mishnah of Antignos Ishtocho.
I'm doing the next one too.
That one, next one. But when I thought of that also, so I was thinking, Antignos, a Greek name, yet he talks about Yirat Shamayim in the Mishnah, and I think that's what you always wanted to impart to us, that we could connect to secular knowledge, just like Antignos is a Greek name, but we have to have the Yirat Shamayim that comes with that. That also comes with learning from Pirkei Avot, and that was a message that you always would put across to us at Yeshiva College. So over all the years, I've carried that with me, and I want to thank you for that. I sit here in Ranana at the Telfed offices, and I can think back to all the wise words that you've said over the years, how you've taught so many people, and I want to utilize this opportunity to say, Yashar Kochacha, and many more good and healthy years ahead of teaching Southern African Jewry and Am Yisrael, because we spread to so many areas around the world. Your impact has been an impact on Am Yisrael, and I think Pirkei Avot is a great way to go about it. So thank you for this opportunity to introduce the Mishnah, and a salute to you, Rav Tanzer.
Thank you, Avdaron. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming all the way from Israel to introduce the Mishnah, and thank you for doing what you're doing for Klal Yisrael through Telfed, making Jews feel at home in Eretz Yisrael, giving them all the opportunities. Nothing could be nicer. Nothing could be a more fitting extension of what we've been trying to do for 50, 60 years. And please God, may you continue to do it for 50, 60 years with your beautiful family, with simchas and nachas and a lot of good health. Now, thank you very much for those very warm words. Undeserved, but appreciated. Okay, Rabbi, I've been taking to a formula, which I'm going to move away from today. But the formula was, we somehow kept the names in front of us. We kept the Masorah in front of us from the first year that we gave, which is now over a month ago, et cetera, and we kept the names in front of us. And let me just do it again quickly, because I don't think we can do it forever. So the Mishnah started with Moshe. Moshe Kibbel Torah. In other words, the first teacher of Torah is Moshe Rabbeinu. And it says Moshe Kibbel. Moshe, being a man of flesh and blood, couldn't possibly receive all that Hashem was able to give, but he could only receive what Moshe could receive. So Moshe Kibbel Torah from Sinai. He received the Torah from Sinai, and whatever he received, 100% of it, Me'achuz, he handed over to Yeshua. Yeshua was a close, devoted aide-de-camp, Talmud, Rabbi, all of his lifetime, never moved from Moshe, knew whatever Moshe knew, Yeshua knew. And then said Yeshua to Zaken, now it's a group. That is no name. But he was also able to transmit all that he knew. And the Zaken to the Nevi'im, and the Nevi'im to the Anshe Knesset Agdolah. So far we've had, with the exception of Moshe, who was mortal, everything else was a 100% transmission. What 100% transmission, what the teacher knew, the Talmud knew. And now comes the Anshe Knesset Agdolah, and we're going through a difficult time. Nevuah comes to an end. Yehuda Tadorit, it's not the same thing. Beit HaMikdash is about to be destroyed. We are in trouble. And the Anshe Knesset Agdolah have this great challenge of how they transmit Torah to the next generation. And of course they did. They gave us the Constitution, they gave us the structure of what Yiddishkeit is all about to this very day. And they were 120 strong, with different opinions, whether they were replaced by other people or it came to a demise as they passed away. And then the Mishnah tells us, so there was one person left, Shimon HaTzadik. Shimon HaTzadik is less almost the last individual name we have here. He was the remnant, the last member of Anshe Knesset Agdolah, and he told us something. He gave us a dictum. What was the dictum? Anshe Knesset Agdolah told us, three things. Now he told us three things. Well, his three things. The world stands on three pillars. The world stands on a tripod. A tripod means a leg made up of three, and if one falls, it all falls. And what are the three things? Torah, Aveda, and Gemilas Chasadim. We dealt with that in great detail. That remains our mandate, our constitution, to this very day. And then came, as the Ron just mentioned, Antignish Yisachai, the man with the Greek name. The man with the Greek name, he was the Gadol Ador. He was a giant, and as the word says, Kibam Shimon HaTzadik. He received it from Shimon HaTzadik. He wasn't appointed by Shimon HaTzadik. Suddenly he came to an end. The authority of the following scholars was invested in the generation before them. They didn't appoint Antignish, but Antignish was the Gadol Ador, the giant of the generation, though he's only quoted once in Shas, and that's this Mishnah right over here. Nevertheless, Antignish Yisachai, he represented the totality of Jewish learning. Antignish Yisachai, and he tried to transmit one of the pillars of Shimon HaTzadik. Shimon said three things, and the Antignish Yisachai elaborated on one. Which one? Aveda, Kavanot, Tfilah, whatever we want to call it, in different times in history, and that's what I think he said. How do we serve Hashem? What's the Ashkofa? How do we represent Aveda to the world? How do we represent Aveda to new generations yet unborn? That they too would want to be part of this proud tradition we call Klal Yisrael. And so he told us about serving Amanas, Kalvapras, serving the master, to receive reward, to not receive reward, etc., etc. And then, after Antignish Yisachai, what came after that, here I have to find my piece of paper again. And now all of a sudden, after Antignish Yisachai, guess what? Now we have two people. We have two names. We don't have one name, we have two names. Yossi ben Yezer, Ish Sreder, Yossi ben Yochanan, Ish Yerushalayim. Two Yossis. Yossi ben Yezer and Yossi ben Yochanan, Ish Yerushalayim, Kiblu Mehem. They were the ones who received the Torah from Antignish Yisachai. Okay. Now, it's impossible to suggest that he knew everything that Moshe Rabbeinu knew, which he theoretically might have anticipated, because the Chazal tell us that in the days of the shiur of Moshe, 3,000 halachas were forgotten. So he had to know 3,000 things to listen to Moshe Rabbeinu. So that's that was about it before in different ways, etc. But what's more intriguing is it says Yossi ben Yezer and Yossi ben Yochanan kiblu mehem. They received the Torah from them. Who's mehem? Who's them? They only got it from Antignish. They only got it from Antignish. They get it from everybody else. So the answer they give is that he received the Torah from Antignish and Shimon HaTzadik. Shimon HaTzadik was part of the rabbinic team as well. And as long as Shimon HaTzadik was alive, that was his Rebbe as well. And so he received it from them. And they now became a new level. Now it became Sanhedrin. Now we have a new name, Sanhedrin, which is a Greek word as well. And what do we have? Talmidei Chachamim, who were responsible for the next 5 generations. And they were, as we mentioned, Zugot. One was the Kohen Gadol, one was the Nasi. The two of them ran the affairs of Klal Yisrael between them. So you have Yosef and Yezer, and Yochanan, etc., etc. Right? And they try to pass on a message. They pass on a message. Now, the Chazal tell us, they tell us that Yosef and Yezer and Yosef and Yochanan, what do we know about them? They were called Ish or Eshkolot, men of the cluster. They were called men of the cluster. The Gemara calls them in Tzemura, and the Gemara in Yuma says that when that period ended, what are called men of the cluster? Ish Eshkolot. So the Gemara says, breaking down the word, Ish Yakobo, a man who has everything. Imagine a man who has everything. It's very hard to imagine. But that's what Ish Yakobo. They had it all. Okay. So they said, so they were the Ish Eshkolot, etc. And they didn't manage to pass that on forever. Didn't mean forever, but what's an Ish Eshkolot? So I used to say this very often when someone had to praise someone or God to eulogize someone, that Eshkol is grape, a cluster of grapes. When Yeshua and Koli were spied in Eretz Yisrael, they came back with a cluster of grapes that was so big it had to be carried on a long pole, which is accompanied by a naked taxi normally, which was the advertisement of Israel in the 40s, 50s, 60s, etc. Ish Eshkolot. So they were the men of the great cluster. What's a cluster of grapes? Everything it's symmetrical. All belongs in place. Nothing stands out. Nothing hits the eye. There's nothing conspicuous because it's perfect. That's what an Ish Eshkol is. An Ish Eshkol is a man. He's a man of sensitivity. He's a man of learning. He is a God Lador. He has everything put together in one. And that's what they were. And so these two gentlemen we have over here, well, Yosef and Yochanan, they were what? Men of the cluster. They were perfect. You couldn't find a flaw, and you didn't know which part of them to praise because it was all there. Everything was there. All right. Now they came along and they said something, and that's today's mission. And this is responsible for what I want to do in a moment. So this is what they said. They said the following. If you want to know how to build the future of the Jewish people, the future of the Jewish family, the future of all the things that are important, may your house be a gathering place of the wise. Your house should be a gathering place of the wise. And then he goes on to say, and how are you going to do that? And cling to the dust of their feet. Just as as when you're walking behind someone, they throw up dust, you cling to the dust of their feet. As they're your teachers. They're going to teach you what life's all about, and you don't want to lose anything. And then it said, Batsoma is the Re'im, and drink with thirsty words. Always be thirsty. Always be thirsty. Well, these are tall order, and not simple words at all, but that's what they said. These are the words of the Yosef and Yochanan. If you want to succeed, your house has to be Beis Madachachon. Some say it doesn't necessarily mean your house. You can make a shul into that too. A Beis Medrash can also be a Beis Madachachon. But they mention a house, so we'll stick with the house. Right. Now, I've always had something I wanted to share with you in the very first year. It was a very fascinating idea, words, and never got around to it because I thought we better get into the Mishnah first. So first we got into the Mishnah, and as we got into the Mishnah, we moved from Mishnah to Mishnah, and all of a sudden I realize now that this message I wanted to share with you then, if I don't do it now, I don't know when we'll do it. I don't know when we'll do it because it's to the point. I think it's potent, it's cogent, it speaks to us. What was it like this? Let me give you a cast of characters. Okay, I'm going to mention names they're not connected to each other. All names are real people. You might have heard of some of them. Okay. First of all, I'm mentioning Marsha's cousin Bela. She has a husband, Yaakov Haber. Yaakov Haber is a very special Talmid Chacham. He was a American-born, Israeli-educated Talmud of Rabbi Pinchas Scheinberg of the famous Yeshiva Oratorah in America and later on in Yerushalayim, and a wonderful Talmid Chacham. Born in Buffalo, he served many communities throughout the world. He was part of the Liquid Kollel in Melbourne, a very well-known kollel 30 years ago. He succeeded Beryl Wine as a rabbi in Monsey in much later times. And then around 10 years ago, he moved on to Bet Shemesh, where he is a Rav, a Talmid Chacham, a Rosh Yeshiva, and a very eloquent speaker whom you can hear on a video every Shabbos for three very clear, articulate moments. Now, Rabbi Haber had developed his own institution. His own institution had a name, etc. And his institution published a sefer, which I'm holding right here. It's a sefer called Rabbeinu Yonah on Pirkei Avot. Rabbeinu Yonah was one of the Rishonim, 13th century scholar, a genius of geniuses, Rabbeinu Yonah. And he wrote Rabbeinu Yonah's sefer on Pirkei Avot, and with an introduction that he wrote himself. And he tried to tell us who Rabbeinu Yonah was, why Rabbeinu Yonah and Rabbeinu Yonah's connection to Pirkei Avot, and why, because of that, Rabbeinu Yonah stands as an eminent authority. His words stand out and deserve to be looked at again and again because they penetrate, they go to the heart of the matter. Now, the cast of characters I would share with you are, and I hope to deal with this in short order, is first of all, I'll mention the Gadol Hador, one of the giants who brought Torah to the United States, Rabbi Aaron Kotler, the Rosh Yeshiva of Lakewood, the founder of the Lakewood Yeshiva, a genius of geniuses in Lithuania before the war and in America after the war. Rosh Yeshiva of Kletsk, and later on, of course, the United States. In the United States, he was brought to Lakewood by Marsha's uncle, Nissim Waxman, who's your uncle too, of course. So you have a home base. Nissim Waxman invited Rabbi to Lakewood. Right? And I also want to mention a rabbi who's visited South Africa many times, a rabbi who is a rabbi in North Miami Beach. His name is Ephraim Elio Shapiro. And his late father was also Rabbi Shapiro, of course, and he was a student of Rabbi Aaron Kotler in Europe. I want to mention him. And I also want to mention Rabbi Shimshon Pincus, who had a South African connection, used to come very often to teach Torah in South Africa and spend many months, a year. And I had a personal connection to him because his father, Avram Chaim Pincus, was my principal of Torah study at the primary school I attended in Brooklyn, Williamsburg. So I knew him well. I didn't know him that well, but I knew him well and knew what he represented. And his forum, he suffered a tragic end with his wife some years ago at Pesach when they came back from the Sheva Brothers, and he and his wife, they were both killed. But his books live on today. He's studied by all serious students all over. Rabbi Shimshon Pincus, I'm sure you heard the name, and if you haven't heard the name, many of the people you do not heard the name. Now, what do I want to put together here? What I want to put together is, let's find over here, is Rabbi Haber said he was instrumental in publishing this work over here on the Pirkei Avos, this work of Rabbeinu Yonah, and he gave it his own introduction. And listen to the introduction because he tries to pinpoint something. What do we look for Rabbeinu Yonah for? And why should we be quoting him of all people? So listen to this, and now I can't find a piece of paper. Oh, here it's right here. Okay, so, says Rabbi Haber, you know, there are many great Torah authors and many styles to Musa. Every God has their own style of Musa, how they try to teach Klal Yisrael. How you teach the Jewish people, all right? Not every author can speak to every soul, okay? Obviously, not every author can speak to every soul. There are, after all, so many different types of souls. How can one person speak to all souls? Nevertheless, he says the exception to this is Rabbeinu Yonah Girondi from Spain, and specifically his book on Tshuva, which he wrote one of the books on Tshuva. His writings are appropriate to every Jew in every time. His writings are appropriate to every Jew in every time, and hence his works on Pirkei Avos, which are about menschlichkeit and how to be a mensch, are very appropriate. Okay, and Rabbi Yoni says came from Girona in Catalonia. He lived in the 13th century, was a grandson and student of the Ramban and the teacher of the Rashba. Like those are famous Rishonim of the 12th and 13th centuries. He is mentioned several times in the commentary of the Tosafos. The Tosafos is to be found on every page of Gemara, and the Tosafot is written by the grandchildren of Rashi. The grandchildren of Rashi compiled the Tosafot, and he's quoted there often. He was considered the most prominent pupil of Shlomo Har. He was considered the most prominent pupil of Shlomo of Montpellier in Provence, who led the opposition to the philosophic works of the Rambam. In other words, there was a group who was opposed to the Rambam. They felt what he was teaching could lead to heresy, and they were against it. And they did their best to undermine the works of the Rambam. And he was involved in that. Rabbi Yonah was, as such, he was one of those who signed the infamous ban proclaimed against the Rambam's Moreh Nevuchim and Sefer HaMadar in the year 1233. And because of him, because of Rabbi Yonah, guess what? Because of him, he felt that these were philosophically dangerous to the masses, and he was the instigator in the public burning of Emanuel's writings by the church in 1233. So in 1233, the church burnt all the works of the Rambam, and he, a leading rabbinic figure, was part of the people who led that. And of course, okay, he did it because he believed it. There's no question he believed it. 9 years later, however, in 1242, 24 wagon loads of the Talmud were burnt by the church in the very same place. In the same place where the Rambam's works were burned, that's where the Shas was burned. And suddenly Rabbi Yonah realized he made a mistake. He had been backing the wrong thing. He had no right to attack the Rambam. He had no right to take a stand against the Rambam. And he realized, and he publicly stood up in the shul in Montpellier, and he asked for forgiveness. Asked for forgiveness for the Rambam. Right. In his repentance, he made a vow to go there to Israel and frustrate himself on the grave of the Rambam and implore his pardon. Asked the Rambam for Mechila in the presence of 10 men for 7 consecutive days. He left France with that intention. He never got there. He never got there. It's Israel. At the end, he ended up in Toledo, Barcelona and Toledo. He was a godly. He ran the Jewish community there for decades on end and never got there, never fulfilled his vow to try to make it up to the Rambam. And in all of his lectures after that, he quoted the Rambam with great deference, with love, with respect, with respect. And when he died from a rare disease, we know about those things today. His son died from a rare disease, considered by many to be a consequence of his failure to fulfill his vow. And he died in Toledo, Spain, in November 1263. Okay. It is surmised that Rabbi Yonah wrote a number of books to atone for his earlier attacks on the Rambam. He wrote many swarm. We're not going to go into details, etc., etc. They've been reprinted many times. Rabbi Akiva Eger, the famous Rabbi Akiva Eger of Poland, said he was particularly moved by the Busa works of Rabbi Yonah was aside from being a great ethicist, he was one of the greatest Talmidei Chachamim who have lived. He was a Gaon in every sense of the word. All right? And so we have over here a case of Rabbeinu Yonah who never got around to make it up to the Rambam, but went to his death believing he owed the Rambam and treating him with great deference. Now here we have Rabbeinu Yonah. We wrote a commentary on Pirkei Avos, and we're trying to work out what is he saying. What is the gist of he saying? Let me read the Mishnah. I'm going to go read the Mishnah and with a commentary here from Rabbi Palm. Okay. The Mishnah says that Yosef ben Yezer and Yosef ben Shalim, what do they say? He basically based Vadlachon. May your house be a gathering place of the wise. May your house be a gathering place of the wise. Who's your house? Me and you. That's our house. A gathering place for the wise. Now, who are they? What kind of people are we talking about inviting? Who's going to make a difference to our house? Right? But this is what he says. Your house should be a gathering place of the wise. And and cling to the dust of their legs, which means treat it with respect. Never think you're doing them a favor. Never think you are the host to these people. You are the guest. When we bring Rabban Kotler into our house, we bring in some of those other people we mentioned. They're not our guests. They're our hosts. We sit, we cling to their words. We want to learn. We never finish learning. We never stop learning. Right? And then it goes on to say, and drink with thirst their words. Interesting, one of the commentaries says, any liquid that a person drinks, you make a bracha. Any liquid. There's one exception. If you're drinking water and you're not thirsty, you don't make a bracha. If you're drinking water because you want to swallow a pill, you don't make a bracha. Now we are being told that we should be learning Torah as if we're always thirsty. We never get used to it. We never take it for granted. Right? And, right. Now, so what does Rabbeinu Yonah say? This is what Rabbeinu Yonah says. What are the kind of people you want to have in your house? A gathering place for the wise. The wise. What kind of wise are they? Are they charismatic figures? Are they well-known personalities? No. That's an illusion. We're talking about reality here. We're talking about real people. These have to be real people to the essence of their being. And the real people, because there's nothing false about them. There's no PR. There's no ego. We're not trying to sell anybody anything. It's quite to the contrary. As a matter of fact, we want to be in your house. Why should they want to come to your house? These are Rabbeinu Yonah's words. Why would anyone want to come to my house? Good question. What do I got to offer him? All I can offer him is a good ear. I want to hear. I want to learn. I want my children to learn. I want to raise a generation of Torah-caring Jews, of loyal Jews. They need role models. I need a role model in my house for my family. And these are the people I need to find as role models. So listen to this. Right? In other words, so we have to create an environment where these people want to be there. Why would they want to be there? We have to create an environment where they feel they are doing something, achieving something, and at the same time managing to do something meaningful, and they're happy to be there. So we're trying to create an environment where Aaron Kotler should be relaxed in my house. That's not simple. Why should we relax in my house? What is it about my house? I'm trying to make a place where Shimshon Pincus was an easier person to deal with, who was obviously much younger. Nevertheless, what do I get to offer him? What do I have to offer him? A good ear. I get tired of listening. We all get tired of listening. How long can we carry on listening? Right? And Rabbi Palm over here, in his usually minimal fashion, says, it's like the Gemara says, when a person walks into a perfume factory, you can't help it. You become part of the aroma. When you leave, you take something with you. And if you expose yourself to these kind of people we're talking about here, well, that's it. this is going to have the same thing over here for you. Righteous, idealistic people will influence, emulate them, and strive for spiritual growth. Of course, the opposite is true too. If you fill your house with people who are totally wild extroverts, whose only interest is Olam is the things of this world that make life great, well, that's what you're showing your kids too. That's the lesson we're showing you. In the company of degenerate, wicked people can greatly impede one's spiritual development. All right? So as he goes on to say, and I don't want to read everything he says here, when we move into a neighborhood, that's one of the things you have to look at. Not all neighbors are the same. Not all shuls are the same. We have to choose a place where our children will grow, where they will see something that will inspire them, something that will turn them on. That's the people we're talking about. That's the kind of people we're talking about. And he says, when you find a shul where people daven, people come to shul to daven, etc., etc. And so this is what these gentlemen, Yosef and Yezer, are saying. You have to create the environment. And Rabbi Yain is adding one word. And why should they like our environment? Why should they want to be in our environment? We have to do something to make that happen. That's not simple. All right. Now let me go back to my list over here, the names I had here. We don't have that much time with. All right. I mentioned Baron Kotler, and I also mentioned Ephraim Shapiro. Ephraim Shapiro is a rabbi in North Miami who comes here quite often as a public speaker, very inspiring speaker. When he comes to our shul, we love him. He comes to many shuls here. They all love him. All right, so he once wrote the following column. He went to the following column. On his first visit to Israel as a very young man in the 50s, very young man, he went to a kiosk in Tel Aviv. I don't know what they were selling. They were selling cigarettes. I don't know if he was a smoker, but they were selling whatever they sold there. And he saw that the proprietor was a very different kind of guy, a very different kind of man. And on Friday in midday, people came to the kiosk and they said to the guy, first of all, he sat there with a sefer. He was busy learning. He wasn't waiting for customers, he was learning. The customer came, he served him. He didn't come and carried on learning. And so he noticed that on Friday around midday time, when somebody came and ordered a pack of cigarettes, the proprietor would look at his watch, he would say, Slicha, I'm sorry, he says, I don't sell cigarettes Friday after Chatzot, after midday, so I'm sorry, I can't take a cigarette. So he was very intrigued. What kind of a Jew is this? The man was obviously an immigrant who had come from Europe, maybe before the war, possibly before the war, probably before the war, but at the same time, unusual behavior. Sitting there with a sefer, never taking his head out of the sefer, and at the same time keeping an eye on the watch. We don't sell cigarettes Friday afternoon. Right? So he talked a few minutes later, and the gentleman said, tell me, he says, where do you come from? He said, he comes from the United States. In the United States, he says, in Europe, they used to call Baron Kotler in his younger age the Rota, the red-headed one, because he was had very sharp red hair. So he says, what happened to the red-headed guy that I remember from Europe? And so he says, what's his name? So when it became obvious who he was referring to, he said, Baron Kotler, he has become one of the biggest Rosh Yeshivas who built Torah in America. He's my father's Rebbe, as a matter of fact. Oh, he says, that's nice. That's nice. That's nice. And then the Rabbi Shapiro said to him, and where do you know him from? Do you have a connection to him? He says, I'll tell you the truth, he says. I'll tell you the truth, he says. He says, I was a butcher in Europe before the war. And I wanted to be a Talmud Chacham. I wanted to be a butcher. But I just found out that I just saw it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to happen, he says, because I didn't have enough time to learn. and then I have something there, and I had to earn a living to support a family. So you know what he said? What I used to do every time I sold a pound or 2 pounds, whatever amount of meat, I put aside a few kopecks, a few cents I put aside, and I saved that up for a whole year. At the end of the year, I went to the Rosh Yeshiva of Slobodka. That's what Slobodka was, the Harvard of the yeshivas in Europe. Many came from Slobodka, and I said to the Rosh Yeshiva, I have here money to send 2 people to Slobodka to learn. Can you please appoint 2 students who can go to learn on my Chaim? So one of them was Rabbi Kotler. So what happened? He's done very well. So Rabbi Shapiro said he didn't know at the time who the other one was, but Rabbi Shapiro was a rabbi in Florida, and as I said the other day, the Gedolim came to Florida for the winter. So he found out the other one was Rabbi Kamenetsky. So these 2 men got to start at yeshiva because the butcher put aside a few cents. That's what a butcher was like. There weren't many butchers like that, but that's what he was all about. And from such a person who puts away a few kopecks so that he can send kids to Slobodka to learn, change the face of America, change the face of the world. And I referred to my friend Shimshon Pincus because he was a very independent soul. These were not people that you could buy with a smile. These were not PR people. They were not people with an ego. There's nothing you can give them. They didn't want anything. They didn't want, they wanted a listening ear. And if they had a listening ear, they were very, very happy. And so the mission is telling us in the words of Isai that at the end of the day, but let me go back to Rabbi Kotler. Rabbi Kotler lived in a flat in Borough Park. Like anyone else lived in a flat in Borough Park. Certainly not a rich man's apartment, maybe not a pauper's apartment, but okay. But he had many wealthy friends. Irving Bunim, some of the stars of the American Rabbit who were great businessmen. And they kept on pleading with the Rebbitzin, they want to refurnish. They'd like to refurnish the flat. Can they please be allowed to buy furniture befitting Rabbi Kotler? And the Rebbitzin remained adamant. She says, don't you dare. Don't you dare, because he'll throw it out. This is not how he operates. He doesn't work on that scale. You're talking about a different thing now. This is not the kind of person he is. That's not the kind of needs he has. And that's not where he wants to be. So leave him alone. He's very happy as he is. So that both sides, this is what I thought. We're approaching Rabbi Yain here. Rabbi Yain is telling us, let me read to you the last few words here if I can find them on this mission here. We are trying to convince the Talmud Chacham, what do we have to offer him? What do we have to offer him? And so Rabbi Yehuda on this mission over here, Yosef and Yezeh, Yosef listen to these words. Yosef and Yezeh straight away, he basically was Levocha. I'm reading the English translation for Rabbi Yehuda. Make it a place where the sages gather when they need to confer. When they need to confer, let them feel that your house is a place. This can only be at the home of an important, prominent person. Not important, prominent because he has money. Important, prominent because he's important and prominent. If it was the home of a base individual, sages wouldn't want to go there. Even when they're right, they wouldn't go there because a contemptible person is repulsive and doesn't honor those who fear God. So in other words, we have to create a home, an environment where these kind of people want to be. Not simple. Not simple at all. Where you're facing a society, you're facing the world out there, but at the same time, the mission doesn't change the stripes or any range of it. So thank you. Thank you all very much. I'm sorry I hope I didn't go over time. And have a great Shabbos and a great weekend. And thanks so much for coming and listening. And good Shabbos to you all. And Aaron,
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you very, very much.
Have a good
Thank
show.
you.
Every single
Shabbat
time.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom.